Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching, however you're watching. This is Quantum of History. I'm your host, Donnie Waldron. Welcome in. Today we're going to be talking about how the CIA, the SIS, MI6 helped manipulate or rig the 1948 Italy election. It was the first election after Musolini, and it was a pivotal one in history. So we're going to talk about how that gets into it, how it relates to James Bond movies. It's been a topic throughout a lot of the movies. You look at Quantum of Solace, Tomorrow Never Dies, Skyfall. When Silva's like, change the regime with the click of a button, boop, boop, done, easy. You look at Dominic Green in Quantum of Solace when he talks about how he can just change the regimes, Haitian, Bolivian, just sign the paper, we'll just change the regime. It's no big deal for us. And you see it in Tomorrow Never Dies, where Elliot Carver is constantly manipulating media to get to their political. So it's a really fascinating topic. And again, as I always say, that history just always ends up repeating itself. You see it all the time. So we're going to go back to the infancy of the CIA, 1948. World War II is over. Cold War is just ramping up. And how the world falls is just being played out. So we're going to talk about how the CIA, SIS, MI6, British Allied forces influenced, manipulated, and got democracy into Italy. Let's start. The era in which James Bond was born was from an era of putting the world back together. World War I, World War II had decimated Europe. And the superpowers came out on top, were looking to mold the world in the way that they envisioned it. The way this was accomplished was the cultivation of scientists, professors, manufacturing techniques, tradecraft, dark agents, and regime manipulation. The regime manipulation is one that James Bond has particularly been keen to. James Bond's talents are better reserved for working in the upper echelon of the aristocracies of the world. His ability to blend in, to get them to trust him, to manipulate them, makes for the best stories. In this realm is where the true world-changing work can be done. And while James Bond may be fictional, the work that was done by the people who inspired the creation of James Bond, his character, was very real. Post-World War II, the world was rushing to put the pieces back. The United States and the Soviet Union had opposing paradigms, and both feared that the other would proselytize their beliefs and take over the rest of the world. In order to accomplish this, there needed to be clandestine organizations to carry out these missions. The Soviet Union started the foundation for these organizations around the mid-1910s. Vladimir Lenin was renowned for his paranoia. Lenin came to power by routing out his enemies of his own party and his opposition. As leader of the Bolsheviks, he led a coup of the Romanov dynasty and created the world's first communist state. He did so by obtaining and acting on information gathered, again, with his party and against his opposition. So once he got into power, he carried the same modus operandi that once he was in power. And this was the building blocks for what would become the KGB and the army's GRU. The United States, on the other hand, was playing catch-up to the KGB by the 1940s. In 1941, Franklin Roosevelt was fed up with the type and the lack of intelligence he was receiving as World War II progressed. In response, he, along with General William Wild Bill Donovan, created the Office of the Coordinator of Information. General Donovan convinced President Roosevelt that the office needed more resources, more people, and a new focus of importance. In 1942, the Office of Strategic Services was created, and at the time it employed 13,000 people, 35% of whom were women. At the end of the war, the OSS was disbanded, and SEX were turned into the Strategic Services Unit, which then became the Central Intelligence Group. And then finally, in 1947, the National Security Act of 1947 was passed, and the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, was formed. With the CIA in its infancy and the KGB years ahead, the CIA had to be quick learners. In 1948, Italy was to have their first election since Mussolini's March on Rome in 1922. Italy had joined Germany in the Axis powers as Mussolini had turned Italy fascist. This laid the groundwork for Italy. I don't know why I say Italy, they always do this. Soviets as a communist nation. The election came down to two clear choices in Italy. either vote for Alcide de Gasperi of the Christian Democrats or Palmiro Togliatti and Pietro Nenni's Democratic Front, which was the Communist Party of Italy. And at the time, the Communist Party in Italy was considered the biggest party outside of the Soviet Union, and it was the largest and most influential in the world, again, outside of the Soviet Union. As the election grew near, the CIA and SIS began working together to make a plan to ensure the communists didn't win in Italy. There was a conference in London in 1948 where the heads of the CIA, the SIS, discussed a bevy of topics from nations on the brink to what to do if there was ever a Soviet war and how to make Italy democratic. Now, the goal was to make Italy democratic through the ballot box and not through an army. At this time, the dangers of the world were still very real, but the wars had drained nations of their resolve and their resources. And that belief was that the win in Italy in and of itself would be devastating, but the implications and the propaganda bump that the communists would get in seeing a nation choose communism rather than be forced into it would be enormous. Italy was in tatters. I mean, the countries were on the brink, and this turmoil and gust of like proverbial paradigm wind, a gust either way, could fall nations. And it's something the world couldn't withstand at the time. So the Truman administration was overt in their interference in the elections. I mean, everything was deployed in Italy to sway the election. The U.S. used propaganda, advertisements, psychological causes. They even made a slogan, o con Cristo o contra Cristo, which is if you're either with Christ or against Christ. They used black propaganda. They used trade unions. They bribed. Suitcases of money were being exchanged for influential heads of organizations, even asking Frank Sinatra and Joe DiMaggio to do radio broadcasts. In the United States, people were urged to write their families in Italy about the dangers of communism and the Communist Party. The British were a little more subtle, but they're still heavily involved in the planning and the implementation of the election manipulation of the time. The British affected food supplies and supported Italian favoring borders. The British also spent a lot of time and resources with the labor unions and their heads to sway them to go to the Democratic Party. Also, the film industry, which at the time had become a political medium to win over the public. In Italy, movies were the favorite pastime of the people at this time. Movies were made to help proselytize anti-communist sentiment. Giulio Andreotti, who was the minister of cinema, used tax dollars to fund pro-democracy funds. Ninotchka is a film starring Greta Garbo with heavy anti-communist sentiments. This was played in almost every Italy theater at the time. It was a full-on onslaught of propaganda machine to work to defeat the communists. Now, on the other side, the communists in the Soviet Union relied on older style forms of information dissemination. These included rallies, speeches, and printed press. Their slogans and messages relied more on articulated thoughts rather than catchy catchphrases. Like the aforementioned, you're either with Christ or against Christ. Catchy title, but doesn't have much there, but you're either with Christ or against it. And by the time the communists realized the impact that the new medium of film was having on people, it was too late. It was already too late for them to start making their own films. And Stalin himself had disdain for Italy. He went against many Italy attempts for rehabilitation, including voting against Italy's inclusion into the United Nations. So by the time the elections came about, the narrative that was being promulgated throughout Italy was that communism was offering a harsh and bleak bill of sale, whereas Western philosophy was one of hope and one of Christ. Christ was on your side if you were democratic. And this was in part due to the brilliance of the British and American manipulation of the culture mediums at the time. And this same theme continues today. As mediums change, the side that utilizes this medium the best usually wins. Facebook and Twitter have become social media monopolies and have become the new medium in which information is shared. The CIA, FBI, SIS, NSA, and every other investigative agency across the world is now weaponizing these platforms for a myriad of reasons. And one is election manipulation. Traditional means such as television news networks have lost their sphere of influence due to things like podcasts, social media, YouTube, and numerous other mediums in which people can have the flow of information come through. And as such, the world is adapting to use these mediums better. And again, in the same way that was done in 1948. Hollywood has long been a de facto political propaganda machine. And you see it in the types of movies that come out, even like recently. You look at when the politics are the hashtag Me Too movement, Hollywood cranks out a bunch of action movies where females are the lead roles. Or now it's, if racism is the jour, you see a lot of that theme, the racist theme, movies being shot out. And again, it's the same with musicians. Every 4 years, musicians in film are used the same way. And it's the same thing was in 1948. They used all this stuff. Ultimately, the Christian Democrats won 48 to 31% of the election margin to beat the PCI communists. From then on, Italy continually voted Christian Democrat for 48 more years. The CIA estimates that between $10 and $20 million were spent in Italy at the time, which is about $200 million nowadays. Was funded to keep Italy free of communism. The Soviet also poured millions of dollars themselves in, but they couldn't compete with what the onslaught of the Allied forces were doing. And again, they were still using old mediums, whereas they had turned into more, film and stuff like that. And in the turn events, communism lost again, and it's a theme that you would see throughout the 20th century. Again, what I always love doing about this stuff is history always repeats itself. You see the same tactics being used today. You see, in 2012 it was a very Facebook centric election again, and you see it again in 16, in 20. Like it always changes, and again you see it in a lot of things, and the government knows the lessons that were learned. Again, the CIA was in its infancy. It was barely really created. And it very quickly became a quick study on how to manipulate mass public things. And you're seeing it a lot of times you're seeing it now, even like COVID. You're looking at the COVID restrictions and COVID and how they see it. I can't tell you how many radio ads and TV ads you see advertising the COVID vaccine. Now you're seeing the COVID passport vaccine. And again, you see that Russia was in the election thing. Like history always repeats itself. It's what I always love about doing this, and it's the world in which James Bond belongs in. Right? This is the world. This is government and world manipulation. This is the things that is so interesting to me. I don't know why this is like my most fascinating topic, but I really do think that when you see the elites again, the aristocracies, the oligarchies that really have the upper echelon sphere of influence. This is the stuff that's so interesting for me. To research and to talk about. And again, you see a lot of parallels between what's going on with COVID, with different the way that they advertise things. I can't tell you how many. Again, I hear radio ads that say this is the worst thing that humanity has faced since World War II. Whether you believe it or not, this is how the government is advertising it. And I think you kind of see it in a lot of things, and I kind of see how government does it. But this is why I have kind of two different ideas about these COVID restrictions and COVID, even the vaccine passport, which I have my own thoughts on it, and I'll tell you, I'll explain it by using a metaphor, right? So let's say there's a guy who goes into a daycare and murders a bunch of children, right? He does it. He's on camera. He comes out and admits this. Says, "I hate kids. Hate them. I hate kids. And if I'm let out, I'm gonna kill more kids." Most people would say that guy deserves to die, right? He deserves it, right? And my argument would be that there's never been such a perfect and pure system. There's never been such a higher governmental system that I believe in so much that I would let the death penalty be a thing. Because again, you're giving domain over your body, over your life, to a government, to a organized thing. And if you're going to allow a government to kill other people, understand what you're allowing. Does this person? It's like we see in Batman and Joker, right? Batman is always fighting the Joker, and you're watching the movie, you're like, just end it, just kill Joker already. This would be over. We could have done this in 1990, but he doesn't, because he's got his own moral compass and he's got his own principles, and whether or not he deserves to is not the question. is that, can you? And I'll do this other example to harken back to like the COVID passport and other things. It's like, you ever seen the movies where there's two good guys, right? And they have the bad guy's handcuffed. He's captured. They're dragging him back, and they need to bring him back to base or wherever they need to bring him, right? And then they fight. They all of a sudden are onto another adversary, and they're like, "Oh my God, we're fighting this adversary. We could really use your help." And the guy, the bad guy, is handcuffed. He's like, "Just let me out. I'm going to help you. Just let me out, and I'll help you." And there are two conflicting arguments. It makes for good drama. Is that one side is saying, "No, if we stick to it, we're good. We're going to beat this thing. We don't need to have drastic measures like letting the bad guy out." And then the other person is like, "If we don't let him out and he doesn't help us, we're all going to die." And you see this a lot of times in movies. And this is how I feel that has come with these COVID restrictions and these COVID passports and all these other things that are coming up, is that there's one camp that says, look, the bad guy in this case is the government not letting you out of the house. I mean, you can't leave your home. There are restrictions that say you can't sing. There are restrictions that say you can't have this many people at a table. Mask. You can go to jail. Your businesses are shut down. Your whole livelihood that you've worked for your entire life is taken away from you. That's the bad guy, right? Those are the freedoms. Because understand, humanity didn't have. It's been thousands of years before humanity got to the point where we have autonomy or we have freedom of choice and all this stuff. This is in the scope of humanity. This is a relatively new thing that we have. We have a lot of power as individuals, and we earned that from a lot of hard work that wasn't given to us. We're just reaping the benefits for the work that other people did so that we could have them today. And what people are saying is that this COVID is so bad, and it's such a barrier for humanity that we need to uncuff him so he can fight with us. And that's what it is. Are you willing to give up domain over your person, over your property, over all that stuff, over your business, over everything? Is the adversary that we're facing so big that you were ready to let it out? The idea of it is people trying to do good, right? COVID passport and all this stuff, there are people trying to do good, right? They're trying to protect people and do this all stuff. But it's kind of like Jurassic Park, and I keep using all these analogies, but you spent so much time thinking if you could do it, you forgot to think if you should do it. And it harkens back to my metaphor too, is the person deserves to die, but do I think that there's a institution that I believe in so wholeheartedly that I give domain over my life to them because they're so perfect? No, I don't, and I never will. And that's the same thing with all these other things that have gone with COVID. I mean, you look at the difference. You can't sit at a table 4 deep at Thanksgiving, but you can go millions of people in the street and go march and protest. And it's the same. This is the same. You can't tell me that that's. You can't tell me that that's on a principle-based philosophy. And that's my whole point, is if you're going to be willing, and I always use this analogy too, is that in 2000, around the 2005 when the Iraq War was going, I was first in college, and this thing always stuck with me because it teaches you it taught me, and it may help you too, but it really helped me critical think about issues, and it really had an epiphany for me. And one of the professors said that, ask people, do a survey and say, are you for or against the war? Yeah, I'm for the war. Yeah, go America. Okay, now ask that same question. Are you for or against sending your son or daughter to die in the desert? Are you willing to give your son to go send over there to die in the desert, or your daughter to die in the desert? Well, no, I don't want my daughter to die or my son to die. Well, understand that when you choose a side, there are implications and there are repercussions for whatever side you pick. So if you're a person that says, yes, I'm for war, okay, have you thought about what that implication of saying, yes, I'm for that action is actually? And if you're the person that says, this is such a worthwhile cause, it is worth my son or daughter going and dying over in a foreign land. It is such a just cause that I'm okay with that. If you say yes and have thought about that, absolutely. I respect your opinion. That's your opinion, and that's what it is. But if you're just not thinking about the repercussions of what your yes is, or what, yeah, it's okay, whatever, it's not going to really affect me. If you haven't thought about that, then you need to think about that and then come back with your opinion of it. And that's how I feel about these COVID restrictions and COVID passports and all that stuff, is that I understand that they're done with good intentions. But the road to hell is always paved with good intentions, right? And it's one thing to say, are you for or against a passport? Again, are you for or against losing more autonomy over your body? And again, is this such a perfect, flawless system that I believe that there's no wiggle room for anything? No, I don't. When you make things set in stone, you need a passport to go somewhere. You're more further restricting your travel or all this other stuff. Unless you get it, it's again one step away from, all right, everybody has to get this. Everybody has to get stuck in the arm. Okay, is it such a flawless system that your implementation and your vaccine is so good that it's worth that? That's where I land. And I'm very much a freedom of choice person. I'm very much a freedom of thought, thinking, and going from there. So, and again, if you're in the camp that says that COVID is is such a giant issue that you need to, I can respect that. If you truly think that humanity is in jeopardy and there's going to be, humanity is really in jeopardy and we need to let the bad guy out, which is, I'll take all my freedoms so that we can beat this together. If you've thought about that and you are completely willing for that, I can respect that. That's your point. That's your point of view. As long as you critically thought about it, can articulate it, and really have truly dived into what you think about, and that's your viewpoint, I can respect that. But again, don't just say, are you for or against the war, yes or no? No. Understand the full implications of allowing or accepting decisions that are made for you. This has been Donnie Waldron. This has been Quantum History. I'll let little man tell you what you need to be doing. But as always, guys, stay positive out there. Thank you guys so much, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Like what you saw, then hit that subscribe button. Comment down below and leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Why are you not hitting that subscribe button? Hit